Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at Your Pushback channel. While you're with us, please take a moment to subscribe below and don't forget the notification bell symbol, and we look forward to your comments. What has been the effect of vast numbers of Chinese and Indian buyers flooding the real estate markets of countries such as Canada, Australia, among others? It's part of the wider movement of capital in the globalisation umbrella, but let's have a look at it. I was recently involved in selling a house valued at US dollars 2.75 mil in a nice area with some very good schools and community facilities. All but a handful of buyers were Chinese or Indian, seriously cashed up as well. They were all under the age of 35 years with pregnant dependent wives and often a brood of young children in tow. Chatting to them, it seemed none had ever had any sort of job, let alone a real job, and a sense of entitlement hung on every word and every look. Following up with visits to house auctions in similar areas of the city, which is a city of about 5 million people, the pattern was the same, around 75 Chinese, 20% Indian and 5% local white retirees as buyers who had just got inheritance, without which they could not have played in this price category. So why or how is all this offshore money flooding into the West from China and India? Can the local markets sustain such distortionary effects as these, and are the local populations being relegated to the level of mere spectators in their own backyard? And what are the effects on property ownership in relation to civic participation? And as this massive artificiality unwinds, as one day it must, what will be the fallout? Pivotally, how much of the Western GDP is in reality nothing more than a Ponzi scheme, house price pumping, and not any guide to real productive wealth at all? In a medium-large Western city of population 5 million, the average price of residential real estate has increased by almost 600% over the last 17 years. Just to illustrate the magnitude of such price moves, a house in a middle-class area in 2001 could have been bought for $370,000. Today it sells for $2 million. In prime real estate areas of the same city, the price appreciation is closer to 900%. Prices are more than doubling every 8 years. Yet, based on national salary and income data, the number of the local Western population have incomes sufficient to pay these sort of real estate prices has fallen. Yes, fallen from 28% of all workers in 2001 to less than 1% of income earners today. To drive home the point even further, and even with interest rates half of what they were in 2001, mortgage loan repayments for the exact same house are more than 5 times higher than before. So the number of buyers falls, creating fewer buyers, while at the same time prices go through the roof. Now, new dwelling construction is roughly keeping pace with the rate of purchasing. It's falling a little bit behind, but not so much. So there's no real stock shortages to pump up prices. And the most intense purchasing in the most intense areas of churn is around the already built up inner city and middle distance suburbs. So it's not related to new home construction or new house construction. So clearly the local income earners are not the ones buying the real estate. They just can't afford it. Even the top 1% of the indigenous income earners can barely afford to buy an average price house within the inner and middle distance suburbs. Add to the equation the cost of children and other overheads such as energy, transport, food, etc. And such a household would require 2 household incomes in the top 3% of income earners just to get by. And even then it's a risky business. With such a high cost existence, hitting the wall might only be 1 paycheck away. So the real estate purchasing power is coming from offshore money. That's quite clear, and it's been arriving in quantities so large they can ratchet up real estate prices at more than triple the net rate of historic real estate price appreciation. Watching an Asian buyer casually going from one on-site house auction to the next and laying out $3 million here and $4 million there in a buying spree that can see $10 million or more splurged in one afternoon, and then the same person backing up the next day for another milk run and another $10+ million in property purchasing. These are quite clearly people who have not the slightest concern for money and where it's coming from and how it is made. Multi-million-dollar houses are bought as a matter of factly as anyone may buy a bar of candy at a supermarket checkout. Portfolios of more than 100 freestanding properties, valued at more than $150 million, are not unusual among this sort of crowd. Where does someone who lists their occupation as Army General get $150 million? That these people are new to money is given away by the overdone teenage swagger and the equally overdone Asian slow stroll, as this broadcasts to everybody what a heavy hitter you are. Other people run and scurry and wait for your leisure, not the other way around. Local Western buyers just do not have the capacity to play in this league and stand rather forlornly as the price far outstrips their anguished calculations as to what they can afford in income from their job. They have to work jobs and must deal with the real world of hard-earned income, repayments, responsibility, children, and so on, not the fantasy money playground of the offshore investor. If anything should represent the purchasing capacity of the local working population, house prices and rents should be it. Standards of living depend on it. In real terms, rents have risen at twice the rate of incomes. What would have been $180 weekly rent in a normal real estate inflationary trajectory is now $440 a week in rent. The difference, which fuels the real estate bubble, comes straight out of the pockets of the Western renter and worker, which makes every renter worse off and thus lowers their standard of living. By placing residential real estate in the crosshairs of international investors, most of whom derive suspiciously large incomes from endemically corrupt societies with all-powerful and unaccountable elites, the purchasing power of Western workers is like pathetic serfs trying to join a game they do not have a hope of meaningfully participating in. Moreover, the Western real estate scene has become little more than a money laundering scheme for well-connected corrupt offshore goons to buy pretend legitimacy and associated bragging rights. Yet the damage goes further. Exploiting work visas and other immigration loopholes, particularly Chinese buyers use proxy buyers to acquire real estate. So illiterate part-time cleaners can own several properties worth many millions when in reality they own property on behalf of the daddy at the centre of the offshore money pot. In this way, tax offsets can be accessed which would be unavailable to the offshore buyer. Peasants likewise are specially brought out from the Chinese rural areas to mine the properties for the owner, thus keeping the property off the market, which in turn strangles supply. Other than multiple property owners and property developers or associated insider traders, the great mass of the Western populations in smaller but open real estate markets are being left behind and have suffered a huge loss in their standard of living. The much-needed and belated trade rebalancing of the Trump administration has quickly fed into the reduced offshore-based real estate buying activity, which, if it continues, will play a large role in returning Western real estate to intrinsic value. This will, in the final wash-up, be a good thing, and cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Vancouver and so on will benefit because of it. You've been with Tacitus today, and thank you for listening.